They thought they could bully the quiet new girl. By the time they realized who she really was, it was already too late. When Zara Williams stepped into Lincoln Academy for her second day, she wasn't just the new girl. She was a target. In the middle of a crowded hallway, laughter cut through the air like a blade. "Well, look what the wind blew in," sneered Tyler Morrison, standing directly in Zara's path. "At least this time, they didn't send us an ugly monkey." Silence fell like a curtain. Dozens of students froze. Some pulled out their phones, already preparing to record what they assumed would be another humiliating takedown by the school's notorious trio: Tyler, Jake Sullivan, and Brandon Pierce. Zara, 17 and composed, stood perfectly still. It was exactly the nightmare her mother had tried to protect her from, the very reason she'd scraped together every penny to transfer Zara out of the neighborhood school. But now, here she was in a prestigious Connecticut academy, facing the same cruelty, just in more expensive shoes. "What? Cat got your tongue?" Jake smirked as he flanked Tyler on the right. "Or do you not speak English?" Brandon stepped in from the left, forming a tight circle around her. "Maybe she prefers bananas over apples for lunch," he sneered, drawing a few uneasy laughs. Zara took a breath, but what flickered in her eyes wasn't fear. It was stillness. Calm. Dangerous calm. The kind you feel just before a storm hits. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice slicing through the tension. "I need to get to class." Tyler laughed louder. "Your class? Sweetheart, you're in the wrong school. Yours is across town." And then, she smiled. Not a wide smile, not even a mocking one. Just a small, quiet curve of her lips. But something about it made a few students instinctively take a step back. There was something off about that smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something you didn't. Zara tilted her head. "Tyler Morrison, son of the mayor. Jake Sullivan, family owns the dealership. Brandon Pierce, your father's the big shot lawyer in town." The boy's smugness faltered. How did she know that? "You really think you can pull this off in front of half the school and walk away clean?" she asked, her voice calm, but now laced with steel. Tyler stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Listen here, you. I'd think twice before finishing that sentence," Zara interrupted, locking eyes with him. Something in her stance, the way her fists were relaxed, feet perfectly spaced, sent chills through a few observant students. Some recognized it. Military families, combat athletes, people who knew what a trained fighter looked like. Before things escalated, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" Principal Reynolds appeared, his presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. Tyler flipped into his practiced role, smiling politely. "Nothing, sir. Just welcoming the new student." The principal eyed the group suspiciously. "Ms. Williams, is everything all right?" Zara kept her expression serene. "Perfectly. Just getting to know my new classmates." As the crowd dispersed, Zara walked calmly to her locker. Her hands were steady, her breath even. But her eyes, they held the quiet fire of someone who had endured much worse and wasn't going anywhere. What no one knew yet was that Zara carried a secret. One that would soon upend everything the school thought it knew about her. And Tyler, Jake, and Brandon, they were about to find out the hard way. "I bet $50, she cries. Tyler's voice dripped with cruel confidence as he strutted down the hall, flanked by Jake and Brandon. None of them noticed that Zara was walking right behind them, silent, calm, and smiling. She checked her phone discreetly. Message from Professor Thompson. Demonstration confirmed. 3 p.m. gym. All investors present. Show them what you're capable of. While Tyler was preparing to deliver what he thought would be the final blow in a week of calculated bullying, Zara was in the girls' locker room, lacing up her protective gear. She wasn't just warming up for a performance. She was preparing for a reckoning. At 2:30 p.m., Tyler stood in the school's courtyard, grinning as he watched Zara sitting quietly on a bench across the way. He didn't realize she was recording his every word with her phone tucked into her history book. "Today she begs," he sneered, pulling out his phone. 50 people are going to watch her cry and apologize just for existing," Jake chuckled. If she even makes it home, Brandon added, cracking his knuckles. They had no idea they were walking into their own downfall. 3 p.m., Lincoln Academy Gymnasium. The gym was packed. School board members, wealthy investors, faculty, and even Mayor Morrison himself sat in the front row. All eyes were on Professor Thompson as he took the microphone. Today, he announced, we showcase our athletic excellence. Please welcome our newest scholarship recipient, Zara Williams, state junior MMA champion. Tyler froze. Jake's mouth fell open. Brandon muttered, no way. The defenseless girl they thought they had crushed was a trained fighter, champion level. Zara stepped onto the mat like she owned it. Her movements were effortless, each breath controlled, each step precise. There was no fear, only power. To demonstrate her skills, Professor Thompson explained, Zara would spar with 3 volunteers from the school's wrestling program. All were older, all were bigger. None of them lasted longer than 30 seconds. The crowd erupted in applause. Investors whispered excitedly. Principal Reynolds looked impressed. But Zara wasn't done. She walked calmly to the microphone. There's something else I'd like to share, she said, voice steady. An issue this school needs to confront: bullying and racial discrimination. Silence fell like a hammer. Zara tapped her tablet, which was already connected to the projector. Images filled the giant screen. First, photos from a hallway security camera. Tyler, Jake, and Brandon vandalizing her locker. Then, screenshots of threatening text messages. Close-ups of hateful slurs spray-painted on her cafeteria desk. A time-stamped video of her soaked, shredded books. Gasps filled the room. Mayor Morrison sat up, visibly tense. Zara kept going. Next came the audio. Tyler's voice echoed across the gym. At least this time, they didn't send an ugly monkey. Brandon's voice followed. Maybe she's used to bananas instead of apples for lunch. Every parent, every investor, every student was stunned. Jake tried to duck behind a column. Brandon stared at the floor. Tyler looked like he might be sick. I stayed calm, Zara continued, because I've learned that the best way to fight injustice isn't with fists. It's with truth and consequences. Professor Thompson stepped forward. This behavior, bullying, racism, abuse of power, has no place at Lincoln Academy. Then came Principal Reynolds, face like stone. Tyler Morrison, Jake Sullivan, Brandon Pierce, you are suspended indefinitely. A formal investigation is now underway. Authorities will be contacted. Tyler staggered toward his father. Dad. But Mayor Morrison stood, eyes blazing. You've disgraced the school, your family, and this entire town. Jake and Brandon had already been dragged away by furious parents. Lawsuits and criminal charges weren't just possibilities, they were inevitable. And through all the chaos, Zara remained centered on the mat. Calm, serene, unshaken. She hadn't just won. She had changed everything. There was no gloating in Zara's eyes, only the quiet, steady glow of someone who had delivered justice with dignity. As the gym slowly emptied and the weight of her words lingered in the air, one question remained. What happens to boys raised to believe they were untouchable, protected by money, last names, and illusions of power, when they finally learn that actions have consequences? 6 months later, Lincoln Academy was almost unrecognizable. Once a place where wealth could shield cruelty and silence victims, it had transformed into a model of inclusion and respect. The culture shift wasn't sparked by new policies or mandatory seminars. It began with one girl who decided to fight back. Not with fists, but with evidence, integrity, and unshakable resolve. Zara Williams now walked the same halls where she had once been mocked and humiliated, but everything had changed. Students didn't look at her with scorn anymore. They looked up to her, admired her, respected her. Zara, said Madison, a shy freshman, tugging gently on her sleeve between classes. Some older boys are bothering me. Can we talk? Zara smiled warmly. Of course. You're not alone here, okay? Meet me after class. The mentoring program she started had grown to serve over 200 students. Her self-defense classes were always full, But what drew people in most wasn't just the techniques. It was how she taught confidence, self-respect, the kind of strength that didn't rely on hurting others. Watching her from the doorway, Professor Thompson turned to Principal Reynolds. "She's done more to change the school in 6 months than I've managed in 15 years. The principal nodded solemnly. "And to think, we nearly lost her because of 3 privileged boys who thought they ruled the place. Tyler, Jake, Brandon. Their names were now cautionary tales. Tyler Morrison never recovered. The video of his racist taunts went viral, dragging his father, Mayor Morrison, down with him. The mayor lost his re-election in a landslide. The Morrison family quietly moved out of state, hoping for a fresh start. But the internet doesn't forget. Tyler, now 18, had been rejected by 17 universities. Every rejection letter cited the same thing: character. Jake Sullivan learned the cost of cruelty when his father's car dealership collapsed under the weight of boycotts and outrage. Once a rising entrepreneur, Mr. Sullivan was now bankrupt. Jake ended up washing cars on the other side of town, where every coworker had seen the viral video. Brandon Pierce's downfall was perhaps the most ironic. His father, a high-profile attorney, lost everything when clients dropped him after learning what his son had done. The law firm shuttered, and Brandon watched his family implode in a bitter divorce that none of his father's former colleagues wanted to represent. But the most unexpected transformation came from the last person anyone anticipated: Mayor Morrison himself. It was a rainy April afternoon when Zara found him waiting in the school parking lot, no longer in the city's official BMW but in an old sedan, staring blankly through the windshield. "Miss Williams," he said, stepping out with trembling hands. "I know I have no right to ask anything, but could I speak with you?" She nodded. "I failed as a father," he confessed, tears streaming freely. "I raised a boy who thought the world owed him everything because I never taught him what truly matters. You did in one afternoon what I didn't do in 17 years. Zara's voice was calm and steady. "It's never too late to start doing the right thing, Mr. Morrison." That conversation changed both of them. The former mayor began volunteering at local community centers, using his influence to repair what his silence had allowed. Eventually, Tyler began to accompany him, not out of obligation but because he wanted to understand. Healing takes time, but it had begun. At graduation, Zara stood at the podium as valedictorian, facing a packed auditorium of parents, educators, and college representatives competing to offer her full scholarships. "A year and a half ago," she began, "I came here afraid. I tried to make myself smaller, hoping I could avoid being noticed. I thought it would be easier to hide." She paused, scanning the room. Her mother, in the front row, wiped away tears. In the back stood Morrison, eyes glistening. Tyler stood beside him, silent and humbled. "But I learned that our strength doesn't come from hiding who we are. It comes from having the courage to stand up and be seen, to speak up when it would be easier to stay silent. When we face injustice, we have 2 choices: let it define us, or rise up and redefine what's possible." Applause erupted, thunderous and sincere. 2 years later, Zara received a full scholarship to Harvard, where she would study law with a focus on civil rights. Her mission was clear: to give others the same strength, the same voice that once saved her. She stayed in touch with Professor Thompson, now retired. "You know what your greatest victory was?" he asked her one day. "What?" "You didn't just change those boys. You changed every student who came through that school after you. You reminded them that real strength isn't about intimidation. It's about dignity." And that was the lesson Zara left behind. That when we're faced with prejudice, we can either sink to the level of those who hurt us, or rise so high they can never touch us again. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between hiding or standing tall? Between revenge and justice? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that prove courage and dignity will always overcome cruelty and hate.